Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is a first rendition of a series that we're running on the Pain to Profits podcast called Street Smarts. And this is really about giving away the game for free. But today's topic specifically is in and around it's a mindset topic, right? And so we're talking about, I wrote an issue this week in the newsletter called Finding Your Plan de Vida, right? And so I stumbled on that terminology because I was watching a show on Netflix called Blue Zones. And so if you haven't watched it, I highly recommend it. And they were basically going across the globe and trying to figure out why were there so many people living to 100 in these certain locations, right? So they were in Icary, they were in Sardinia, they were in Japan, they were in Costa Rica. And there's this kind of mindset that everybody kind of lives by. In all of those areas, they share the same thing and they call it something different. In Japan, they call it Ikigai. And in Costa Rica, they call it Plan de Vida. But the core concept is, what is the reason that you get up in the morning? And I think that's incredibly important. If we have anybody in our life who we know is aging, elderly, the moment that they lose their purpose is the moment that the light kind of fizzles out in their life. And I'm talking about, if you don't believe me, the one guy in Costa Rica was 100 years old, riding a horse, ranching cattle. And it didn't look like a decrepit dude riding a horse. Yeah. He could have passed for 70, honestly. And they didn't even believe him. They had to go all the way down and find the record that this guy was legit 100 years old. And so what I took away from that, though, was this: when it comes to business and entrepreneurship, there has to be an underlying meaning or purpose for why somebody would do something so crazy, right? There's just a small segment of the population who is entrepreneurs, who thinks they should do that. And for our audience specifically, you're probably a mid-career professional. You've probably been in the game of business for a long time. You're probably making very good money, but there's something more that you want. So flipping the mic back in a Darius format, I submit to you, what was the reason that you decided to walk away from what most would consider a very good opportunity to jump in on entrepreneurship? And then second to that, what was the mindset shift that you had to go through in order to make that transition?
Yeah, I'll start with the latter and then hit the former.
Okay.
So for the mindset shift, it was actually quite a few things. First was, no one's coming to save you. When you're an employee for any number of years, there's actually a lot of things that go right over your head. And, water cooler talk, complaining sessions, there's actually a lot of layers that you actually don't have exposure to. Not that they wouldn't be important to you, but you actually have no awareness of them. And when I left the company and I was out trying to find clients of my own and doing things, and I had moments where I was like, I have to wear all hats. When it's sold to you through the media you consume or the conversations you have, it's like you just make a decision. But when you think 3 steps ahead of that decision and you're like, oh, that means in making this decision and assuming this position, I'm responsible for this, but I'm also responsible for this, and this, and this. And
so I want to stop there, though. What were some of the weaknesses you found in the chinks in your own armor that you had to level up on? Like, what was it that you were like, oh, damn, I wasn't ready for that?
One, a sense of urgency. First was a sense of urgency, planning my days, being organized, knowing that you have to actually have an order to your day. You have to actually say, despite not necessarily being where I want to be, this is the day I'm seeking to create. These are the things that I'm seeking to do. These are the people that I need to reach out to, and I need to do them. And I need to actually become accountable to whether or not I do them or not. So, okay, well, you need to reach out. You need to make 20 reach outs this week. Did you make 20? Actually, have you even logged that? Do you know how many do you need to reach to get to $2,000? So it was those kinds of things that had to be leveled up. As I said,
because when you're coming from being an employee, all the other things are taken care of for you, right? You're not worrying about the finance on the back end.
No.
You're not worrying about lead generation. You're not worrying about selling the account in your specific situation. You're not worried about insurance. You're not worried about balancing the books. You're not worried about any of that stuff. And I was actually writing about this morning, but when we think about scaling a company, we always talk about, everybody thinks about revenue. Like, I'm going to scale, and they think, oh, they can picture the revenue going up, or they can picture more users or whatever it might, more customers, whatever it might be. But there's really only one thing that scales inside of an organization, and that's time. Mm-hmm. And you can scale that by way of people, processes, and technology. But when you first jump in, you just have like a limited amount of time.
Yeah.
And so I'm interested to know, what did you quickly realize was the most important place to be spending your time when you first launched your business? Because you can get caught up in all this like vision, you can get caught up in all this stuff. I have a specific opinion about that, but what was the epiphany for you?
Well, the epiphany was, there are things that people will pay you for. There are things you desire to get paid for.
Right.
But there are things that people will pay you for, and opportunities that are right in front of you that you have to seize.
Yes.
So while you might want to have this great consulting gig where you do all this, you develop this package, someone just came right in front of you and said, I really need help with this. And because you're so focused on that, you potentially will miss this. And so I had to have a couple of those conversations with myself of like, I don't necessarily want to do that, but I need to say yes, because in saying yes, it's going to get me to be able to do that thing.
Yeah. So the takeaway is, you got to get revenue.
Yeah.
You can't entrepreneurship, especially when you're first making that leap, is like, you don't have the luxury of just being picky and choosing because you have no track record yet. You haven't earned the right to actually do that. And so sometimes you're going to take jobs that maybe you don't want, but if you're smart and you level that up, and if you guys click on the link, if you're watching this on YouTube, I just put together a video on 15 steps to go from zero to revenue. But if you're smart, you can use those first free or smaller jobs and turn them into reviews or social proof, which then affords you to get more clients and continue to play the game.
Absolutely. And to your earlier questions, the biggest revelation that I had for you guys out there who are taking the leap is, ask yourself, what is a business? Because you're like, oh, I'm going into business. I'm going to start a business. I'm going to be an entrepreneur. But you have to ask yourself the question, what is a business? What are the components of a business? If you don't identify those things, then you actually don't have a business. And so if you don't have someone you're serving, if you aren't asking for payment on that, if you aren't thinking about the solutions and the communications and the correspondence and what are the components of what actually makes a business, an incredible book for this is a book called Business Model Generation. It walks you through the actual channels of what a business is. So you can begin to mentally see, this is how a business works. Every business, while they may look different, at their core, the same things are taking place. Mm-hmm. And if you don't understand that, you don't have a business. And so someone is like, oh, well, they're exchanging time for money for this particular thing. And they're saying, I am an entrepreneur, I have a business. Well, on paper, you might have an LLC, you might have, these things in a banking account and all of that. But if you don't have this form of delivery, of being able to deliver, if you don't have this process set up, if you're not thinking about the sales process and you're not thinking about developing standard operating procedures, just writing things down, how do you go about doing things? If you're not identifying who needs to be involved in this process, who can do this to offload this from, these are the things that make a business work. It's people doing different things to ultimately accomplish one outcome. And so,
and if it's stuck in your head, or it's a crude process, right, or it's all relying on you, you don't have a business.
No, you don't.
You have a glorified job. It doesn't actually become a business. This is the weird thing, right? So you're building the business and simultaneously trying to replace yourself.
Right.
And it's not until the point where you could literally die tomorrow and the business could keep running that you actually own a business, right? Conceptually, it's like this energy drink can, right? It started from just aluminum. It's not a can until it's done. It's actually not even a can until it gets, utilized, right? And so you have to build it first before you can actually.
Well, and even to the point, like, so this is a Red Bull. We are still officially sponsored by Celsius on this channel, but nonetheless, I have a Red Bull today. But this can started as a piece of aluminum.
Yep.
Was not in this form, had to be made in this form, and had to actually have things happen to the metal to make sure that it's safe to contain this drink. Someone then had to go and design this label. Someone then had to ship this. Someone then had to price this. Someone then had to get the money for it. And so it's just this notion of, to people out there who are wanting to take the leap, know what a business is. And there's enough education and resources out there to tell you and show you what a business is. But if you are like, I'm going to be an entrepreneur, find out what a business is.
Yeah. We created a resource called the Entrepreneurial MBA. Business really breaks down to 8 core things. We've talked about it a lot on the pod. You got leadership, you got finance, you got operations, you got growth, you got product, you got service, you got sales, you got marketing. Mm-hmm. The challenge with business books is they're generally, somebody will recommend a book to you without the context. And so you first have to stop is this a product book? Is this a marketing book? Is this a sales book? Is this a leadership book? And if you can get clear first of what you're focusing in on, then you will know how to better use the information that you're going to gather when you read that book. So the Entrepreneurial MBA, we'll link to it. It basically breaks out all the top books that we think made an impact in our life as it relates to those 8 core concepts, broken down by those concepts that you can just click to and link to. We don't make any money from that. Yeah. But that's how I learned. I didn't go to business school. I studied human physiology. I learned by the School of Hard Knocks, like most entrepreneurs do. And I kept trying to find mentors who would help me on this entrepreneurial journey, and they would give me like really unpragmatic advice. It's kind of like sales, right? They would say, oh, you just got to get them to say yes more. What the heck does that even mean, right? Yeah. It wasn't until I got some good training and I read a book called like The Lost Art of Closing that walked me through all the different closes. There's 10 different closes you have to have in order to get somebody to make a decision. And if you don't know where you're at in that sales cycle, it's going to be incredibly hard, right? But if you're going from 1 to 10 and you're missing all the steps in between, it's going to be very challenging for you.
Did you ever see that show? It was like a robot war show. You ever remember that show? Where they would like get into this like little circular area and these robots would fight.
The kids would like make them, or the adults
they'd be like destroy each other with saws and stuff, lasers and axes. I think about it like that in the sense of like a business, and when we can move on, because I'd never told you the first part, which was what I was thinking about.
Yeah, we'll get there.
A business is the machine, but you're actually competing within the game too. And I think that was one of the major breakthroughs was business very much exists as a machine. Your business is a machine. Now the quality of that is up to you and the people and what you're doing that exists within a game being played. And that mindset shift was also a shift for me too, of like, there's a competitive nature to this. There's a ruthless nature depending on what you're doing to this, very unmerciful. And when I initially left, I was all in my feelings. I got my passion. I got this. The world's just going to open doors and I'm going to walk in. And it's like, whoa, wait a second. You're a machine. You don't have a machine, first of all. And you're in a game with a bunch of people who do have machines, and they're high quality, high powered machines. They're going to beat you. Yep. And so take inventory of where you really are. Be honest about that. Oh, you're a baby entrepreneur. You're growing. You got to learn how to build the right machine and play the game.
That's good. And the game is infinite, right? So you're sometimes mentally, and this is good. This is really what this is about. The mindset around it is sometimes you feel embarrassed. You're going to go through imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
You're going to feel like you're not good enough, capable enough. You're going to get shut down. You're going to lose a sale, whatever it might be. It's just a friend of ours said that embarrassment is the price of entry.
Yeah, for sure.
So if you're stepping into something and you just got it all figured out, then you're probably missing something.
Yeah, 100%.
To put it that way. So the game is infinite, and just because somebody else is doing better than you doesn't mean they're winning and you're losing. It just means that they're currently doing better than you. The game is long. You change your time horizon. Those are all things that help. Did you want to finish answering the question, or do you feel like you got, because I asked you too.
You asked me too.
Okay.
Well, I guess going back to what I thought and what I was thinking.
Yeah. What were you seeking, I guess, that you couldn't get while being employed?
Being frank, I was seeking peace of mind.
Okay. Clarify that.
Well, without disparaging the people I was with, because I do respect them and God's sovereignty had a plan for me to be there. I found myself in a situation where I felt as if I was working a lie.
Okay.
So,
the disconnect between the work that you were doing,
between the work that I'm doing, what I want to do, and what I actually believe is important in life. So, for example, in this case, let's just say I was tasked with a particular role, and the way I saw it, my role is responsible for a lot of the things that were front facing to people.
Yeah.
If I am in a position where I would say if I'm tasked with positioning a company, not even that company, but any company as the best, but I know deep down inside, I'm not doing the things to be the best. The people around me don't seem to really have a sense of urgency to do the things to be the best. And it's just say it anyways. Those things create conflict in me because I'm such a person I try not to lie, to be frank. And so nothing about them is just more of, I didn't have peace of mind. And I also felt like I didn't have control. I didn't have any freedom.
That's what I was going to get at. Right. That's the bigger issue is you recognize this discontinuity,
right,
but you didn't have the control to fix it.
Right.
And so it was just kind of like get in line and do what we tell you, which is what most entrepreneurs are chasing: freedom. And there's 4 of them: freedom of time, freedom of money, freedom of relationship, and freedom of purpose. And you actually get them in that order: time, money, relationship, and purpose. Right. You put money before time, you just have a job. And so I think that's probably the bigger why that you were after, because if that was true, there was a disconnect between what you were doing and what was actually happening, you would have just went and got a job.
Right.
But you didn't. Right. You decided, oh, no, I'm going to go do this solo thing. And so I think that's an important thing to note. If the thought of going and getting another job and working somewhere else makes you sick.
Yeah, I didn't want to do that anymore. And what's important to you, right? Like I had to come to terms with like, my life is it's long, but it's also very short.
Right. And are you going to be stoked that you stuck it out for, 40 more years doing something that you weren't totally excited about?
No. And if we are being completely honest, and I'm not ashamed to say this, when you think about wealth, financial security, having assets and equity and opportunities that extend much further beyond you to your children and your children's children, you have to do things to get those. And
you can't take the easy route,
and so I was contemplating that too. I was not afraid to, hey, this is how people who get wealthy, get secure, function in business.
Yeah.
They take these roles. So if you want that, you need to take that role.
So 2 questions to follow up with that. The first one is let me think about how to phrase this. There's the way that you thought entrepreneurship worked, and then there's the way that it actually worked. What was the one biggest aha moment? Like, oh, I thought I understood the game, but now I understood the game because I'm in the game. What was that big aha moment for you?
I can say I can tell you what the realization was.
Yeah.
The realization was successful entrepreneurs are the best relationship builders I know.
That's good.
And I'm a bit of a lone wolf, not going to survive.
Yeah. And there's that great saying that we talk about a lot, which is if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
Yeah.
And building a team, building partners, that's a vital skill. It's something that you have to learn. You've had bad partners or made bad choices. And the easiest mistake to make when you're finding partners is to find other people who are just like you. Mm-hmm. You need people who actually fill in your gaps and can cover up where you have mistakes and aren't afraid to challenge your confirmation bias. Because that's the one thing too that'll ultimately kill you is you're charging full speed ahead on a road that maybe is taking you right off a cliff.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurs
that are successful that I know are the best people at relationships. I'll say, dude, I got this going on. I know a guy.
Yeah.
I have a guy.
Our buddy Jeremy Holt's that guy.
Right.
I got a guy.
He's from Jersey. I got a guy. Or like, you know what? Let me connect you with this person. And I realized I don't have those relationships. And so I need to be around people who are pursuing what I want that will actually allow me to come in and humble myself.
That's a good nugget. If you want to get jacked, go hang around jacked dudes. Yeah. You want to get strong, hang around strong dudes. You want to get fast, hang around fast dudes. 100%. You want to be an entrepreneur, you got to start hanging out with entrepreneurs. And if you're currently, in a profession or in a career and you're not going out of your way to start kicking it with entrepreneurs, you're going to have a hard road when you decide to make the transition. So the transition actually starts a year before you're ready. You're building personal brand, you're making those networks and those connections, and you're building your community of other entrepreneurs. And you will quickly see how different they think compared to you.
Yeah. And I can see that too. Like there were guys in the company that I was at that left and pursued the same path. And if I look at how we interact, we very much live that same thing of like, we all have maintained relationships in our pursuit of what we're doing.
Yep.
Because you need that. Like if you want to be an entrepreneur, I know it's easy to think like, oh, I get to be in control. I get to do this. I get to do it my way. Well, you ain't going to do it alone. And that's just the truth. You're not going to do it alone. And I know there's technology out there. So you can be a solopreneur, totally can be a solopreneur, use tools and all of that. But you aren't an entrepreneur.
Yeah, don't get it twisted.
Yeah, until other people are involved in the process and there's risk and accountability and relationship building with full of consequences.
And I'll add to that, until the business can operate without you. It can outlast you. So I'm going to ask you this question. You already kind of alluded to it, but how did you wrestle with the imposter syndrome? Because I think that's a big thing too. I mean, I myself, every time you go to a new level, right? You're pitching. I pitched a $350,000 consulting gig yesterday, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So that doesn't feel uncomfortable to me, but I'm excited for the day when I get to pitch $1 million consulting gig, right? But you go to that new level, you haven't been there before. There's this imposter syndrome that kicks in, right?
Yeah.
So how do you personally deal with that?
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of putting a bow on this and bringing it back to finding your Plan de Vida or your ikigai.
Yeah.
It has to be bigger than just making money, because you're going to get kicked in the teeth quite a bit.
Yeah. Well, for starters, I realized the people around you that are pursuing the same things don't care. They don't care. They know, and they've all been in that same position. So you're making a big deal about something that the people who share the same values and have the same pursuits do not care about. And
so the peers, the employees that you work with, they care about that status stuff. But most entrepreneurs are like, oh man, you took it on the teeth and you got back up and did it again. Like I was there. I remember when I lost everything.
Yeah. And those are the people whose opinions really should matter most in these formative times. So if they don't care, why do you care so much?
100%.
And then second, if you're actually trying to put in the work, it's okay. It's okay. So much of the imposter stuff is one of the things. So there's a guy out there named Dame Dash.
Okay. I don't know that name.
Dame Dash. He's so in the hip hop culture, he's a pretty legendary entrepreneur, business mind. I think he has a lot of great insight for the entrepreneur person. He's not necessarily like a safe brand, but he drops a lot of nuggets for people who come from my background and stuff.
Yep.
And so, but one of the things he says is, dude, if you're thinking, you ain't working. and so when I've felt moments of imposter syndrome and working through that, I've tried to be aware of like, how much time am I really spending thinking about this?
Yeah, that's good.
And then you've said things to me at times like, dude, that doesn't matter. Like for someone to just say that doesn't matter is a game changer. And
the only thing that matters at the end of the day is execution.
Yeah.
When I get into those situations, this is a little nugget that I've used to get through those, because you can have moments where like, it feels like you're in the middle of Sahara Desert. Like it's 40 years in the desert moment, and you're just waiting to get to the promised land. And so when I'm feeling that way, it's because my mind is starting to focus on the negative stuff. It's focusing on the ways that I could lose. So instead, what I do is I start stacking the wins, and I literally will write this out. I don't even think about the losses. I start stacking what are all the things that I'm just killing it at right now, right? This is going well. This is going well. I got this opportunity in the pipeline. Here's what's coming up. I'm working these 3 deals. These things are closing over here. And as soon as I do that, it changes the experience, because excitement and nervousness feel exactly the same way, but they differ by one thing,
right.
The thoughts that we tell ourselves. And so you constantly have to, it's a rewiring of our brain that we have to go through this process of re-engineering those thoughts when we're feeling uncertain or unsecure, like we used to in our warm, fuzzy blanket that was our job, right? Mm-hmm. I know my check's going to be there. Well, I think if there's one thing that we learned in the last year, you're safe and secure until you're not, because there's all these things that are happening that you're not paying attention to because you have blinders on in your job. But any logical entrepreneur outside looking in saw that coming a mile away. You know what I mean? So anyways, when you get to that place of feeling imposter syndrome, my key advice to you is stack the wins.
Can I add one more thing?
Yeah, go.
To be a successful entrepreneur or to be a devoted, faithful husband, to fulfill any particular role in any given position, there are things you have to do. There's a certain person you have to be. And so when I think about being a entrepreneur, a successful entrepreneur, a purpose-driven entrepreneur, kingdom, those kind of things that I fancy myself, that's a particular type of person. And if I'm willing to be that kind of person, do things that kind of person does, say what that kind of person says, I'm not an imposter.
Yeah.
And for me, a major area of where that's dissipated is the kind of man that I want to be and the kind of man that wants to be a successful entrepreneur, qualities they have to have. If I'm stepping into that, I'm not an imposter because that's the truth of what's required to be that thing.
100%. So, I agree with that wholeheartedly. Well, that's a wrap for the first Street Smarts. We're talking about mindset, right? And so at the end of the day, it's important for you to know why you're doing what you're doing. And it's got to be crystal clear because it's going to be hard. You're going to get kicked in the teeth as you're trying to build your business. You also need to spend time surrounding yourself with other great entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs love to hang out with other entrepreneurs and pour into people who are new on their journey and help them in that. But what we don't like are like people that are lukewarm, right? Like I'm half in, I'm half out. Like somebody comes to me and says, I just left my job and I'm going all in on entrepreneurship. I'm like, dude, I'll give you my time for free. I'm going to help you through this transition. But I kind of want to take you out to coffee kind of guy. That's not what we're talking about, right? Change your circle. And at the end of the day, when you're feeling a little bit uncertain, make sure you're stacking the wins because those are the things that will ultimately get you through. It's normal. Every entrepreneur does it. We're successful. We're building a successful company. And there's still times where I hate the way I look on camera, feel like I'm not winning. We're not making enough money. Feel like the walls are closing in on me. It's just part of the game. Until next time, peace out.